So, Railroad Rivals. Hey, there we go. Dramatic zoom out. There we go. All right, so Railroad Rivals. The goal of the game is to invest in one of the historical 12 companies as the game goes along and boost the value of those companies to then have the most lucrative portfolio by the end of the game. If you guys are familiar with games like Age of Steam or Railways of the World or Steam, this is actually going to be a simplified version of that in a lot of ways. It's almost like Carcassonne meets Age of Steam, kind of, but in a more kindler, gentler way. That kind of broad overview of what you're looking at here in the game. So the game's going to take place over about a dozen rounds, give or take a little bit. And over those rounds, we are going to, honestly, the easiest way I know how to teach this is to go over through the 4 steps that each round has. So step 1 is we're going to draw tiles. So the first thing we're going to do is, based on player count, we're going to draw 3 of the tiles that are out there. So there are 2 types of tiles in this game. There are city tiles, and down below that, we have stock tiles. So the first thing we're going to do is draw those out, and those are randomly seated here in the stacks of tiles, as you guys can see there. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to then bid in turn order. Turn order is going to be done in reverse turn order. So you'll have to forgive me that with the expansion, we did not get a green player marker to go with the green expansion pieces. However, we figured there's enough green here to signify that that's going to be the green player. So Jess is playing Christine Drover. I'm playing Elias Mounsey, and Andrew is playing Ernie Vukovic. We'll go with that. Yeah. That's close enough. So you'll notice the border here. We have the blue outline, the yellow outline, and then predominantly green. So the auction is going to take place in reverse order. And the first legal bid is a bid of 1 or pass. And again, if you're familiar with a game like Age of Steam, other than this going in reverse order, it's going to be somewhat similar. So if the first bid was 1, you must either increase the bid or pass. If you pass, we are playing with the advanced variant where when you pass, you move down to last. So if the bid's 1, 2, Jess passes, she would be last. It comes back here 3, I pass, I stay second, and those 2 would swap places. Easy enough there. However, you'll notice we don't have cash in front of us. So what are we bidding with? We're bidding with victory points, and we have the victory point track here and the stock market track here, along with the markers for the 12 companies there. So after we have the turn order set, as you can see here, the next thing we're going to be doing is drafting tiles. We're going to be drafting tiles in order as we go left to right. So if it were as such as it will be in the first round, Jess being first, me second, Andrew third, what's going to happen is Jess is going to get first dibs or first pick of any of the 6 tiles that are available. And again, those are going to be 1 per player of the stock and 1 per player of the city. So everyone's going to start the game with 2 hidden city tiles. So everyone, they will know their own city tiles and what they are. For instance, Kansas City and Charlotte here, but the other players won't know what these are, etc., etc. When we draft these, if you draft a city tile, then the next time it comes back around, you're going to be drafting a stock tile or vice versa. So during the course of the draft, you're going to get 1 city and 1 stock. The stock is, well, that's an investment that you're going to have for the most part for the entire game. There's a couple of rule breakers in the expansion that might mess with that. That's why I say mostly. So if you end up choosing a share of, say, the pen, then you'll put that in your tableau, you'll keep it, and then it's going to be worth some number of victory points by the end of the game. Whereas the city tiles, that's actually how we're going to do the whole pick up and deliver aspect of this game. So on a player's turn, after the auction has, or I'm sorry, the draft has completed, what we're going to do is we're going to be placing our tiles in turn order adjacent to existing tiles. So now let me go ahead and zoom back in a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about with this. So I'm going to move the bag out of the way, and I'm going to grab a tile at random here, looking at what can match up with that. Wow, how did I do that? There we go. All right. So let's say on Jess's turn, her being the first player, you'll notice that there are 4 connections available on a given tile. You have the pen up north, you have the B&O on the west side, you have B&O on the east side, and C&O down south. I say down south, just top, bottom, left, right. On your turn, when we get to the third step, which is placing a city tile, you must match up the train companies on one side. If it were as such that if, and indulge me, this wouldn't be a legal play. Let's say this already existed because you must share a side when you place a tile. But if it were something along the lines of this, as long as one of the 2 or multiple connections is a valid connection, that's a legit connection. That's okay. So if Jess played the Indianapolis there on her turn, then what she does, because that is the legal connection, she's going to take one of her markers and place it on either of the side to show that that link is now owned by Jess. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. All right. The next thing that's going to happen is whatever the number is on the corners, it's always going to be the same number, and it ranges from 1 to 4. You're going to draw from the bag here. There are 2 different color of resources. There are brown and black. The rules technically call out for brown and yellow, but because we have the yellow player color and because we're streaming it, I took a little bit of liberty in changing that up. So we'll place 1 good on that tile like so, and that is placing a tile. Then it would go to the second player in turn order, which would be me. I could then play on any of the 6 sides, as it were now, to do so. So I could then play off something along the lines of this, playing that. I place a link on there, and I would draw 2 cubes like so. Easy enough. Then Andrew would do it. Then we go into the 4th and final step of a round, which is deliver a good. Well, how do you do that? Well, in turn order again, players may deliver 1 good across 1 link. So, for instance, Jess could deliver this black cube from Cincinnati to Indianapolis, could deliver the brown cube, or the exact same but going in the opposite direction. You'll notice that she used her link to do so. The company that made the connection, in this case the pen or the PRR, what would happen in there regarding that is we would find the pen and they would then bump up their share price 1 number. So it starts out from 0, and once they're on the board, now it's actually worth something at the end of the game. The good that Jess chooses to deliver does matter. Her being the first player, not as much, but it will come into play. So let's say she chooses to do something along the lines of that. We're going to put the first good over here that was delivered, worth 3 points immediately for Jess, regardless of whose link she used. Notice that this is the first black good that was delivered this round. That means it would move up 3 points up to 9 points, like so. Then, maybe on my turn, if I choose to deliver this black good, it would then be the NYC. The NYC then would also join the stock market and move up 1 from 0 to 1. But you'll notice now this is now the second of a type of good, of the same good. So in that case, I'm only going to get 2 points for that delivery. Whereas had I delivered one of these brown goods, it would have been worth 3 points because it's the first brown good. There are only 2 colors used in a 3-player game. So eventually, or the third player is going to, the second or third player is going to get the lesser value. If there have already been 2 goods of a color delivered and another one gets delivered, then that final one would be worth 1 point. So first is worth 3, second is worth 2, the third of a color is worth 1. Easy enough. However, if Jess had chosen instead, and let's say it were like this, for whatever reason, maybe she's invested in the NYC. She says, you know what, I'm going to take this brown cube and deliver it over here to Indianapolis using my link. Well, she's going to still get her 3 points for being the first one to deliver a good of a color. However, because she used my link, I would also get 2 victory points for doing so. Okay? And the NYC would bump up 1 value, or 1 share value. That's pretty much the game in a nutshell right there. However, we have a couple of buildings over here that are a little bit rule breakers. During the deliver goods phase, when it's that player's turn to act, they can choose to place either their hotel or their water tower out on any tile that doesn't have the aforementioned hotel or water tower. It can have, if it has a hotel on it, there's nothing to stop, say, Jess on her turn to come and place a water tower on it like so. So what does a water tower do first off? Well, a water tower, normally that delivery goes from one city to one and that's it, and it gets delivered. Whereas a water tower allows it then to move that good to a different location, to a different city, okay? So, or be able to move a second time, I think is a good way to put that. So it is possible to chain deliveries using the water towers, okay? Whereas the hotels, what the hotels do is if a good has moved and it settles in a city that has a hotel, the owner of that hotel gets 1 victory point as well. So then that delivery, after we have scored everything, these will then go back into the bag, and then we'll do the 4 steps over again. Draw tiles, bid for turn order, draft tiles, place a city tile, then deliver a good. That's going to go until all of the city tiles are out of the stack. At that point, if we cannot successfully refill the city tile display, we'll then wipe all the 1 or 2 leftover city tiles. We'll put out more stock shares, and then at that point, we'll keep playing until one player has placed their final tile. Once they place their final tile, that's going to be the last round. Then we're going to go into final scoring. Final scoring is whatever the current points are. Then everyone's going to liquidate their own shares based on where they are on the share track. Add that to your points. In addition to that, every link is going to be worth 1 additional point for each player for their own links. Whoever has the most points wins. Now, the expansion, really haven't talked about it because the majority of it are all tiles that are within these stacks. So honestly, I thought I would cover them when we get there. The only other thing that isn't in the game that I figure I should cover now is the New York and New Hampshire. So this is basically, this expansion brings in the Northeast. So in a 6-player game, these shares will also be included in that stack of shares. In addition to that, and I thought this was a nice touch, the Northeast comes into play. So this Boston tile would replace the existing Boston tile. Notice that it has a New York and New Hampshire tile on it. And then, hey, it's Worcester. I even think I pronounced that pretty close.
Worcester, depends on if you go to Polytech.
All right, well, good enough. And hey, Springfield, where I go and play cards. That's pretty cool. Providence, Rhode Island, New Haven, Hartford, and a new New York City to replace the existing New York City because, again, it has the New York and New Hampshire tiles in it. The other things that the expansion bring in, the green player, which is the 6th player, but Jess is green, so, well, that worked out. I appreciate Forbidden Games was thoughtful like that and included that for us. I'm sure that's the reason they did it. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The final round, because we're playing the advanced rules, the final round we will have 2 deliveries each. Other than that, y'all ready to rock and roll?